For 20 years behind the wheel of a bus, I had one rule: never get involved. But that night, I broke it. You see, there's a certain look that veteran drivers learn to recognize instantly. The look of someone not traveling to somewhere, but running from something. I saw that look on the woman who boarded my route out of Sioux Falls, and I saw the car that followed us into the dark. According to protocol, I should have stayed en route, but I made a choice. I decided to help, and now, every time I close my eyes, I think of just one thing. I should have simply pressed the gas. I thought enough time had passed for me to finally tell this story, not just to clear my conscience, but so others would understand. When you try to help a stranger, you can never know where that road will lead. Some names and details I'll change, but the essence remains true. This story began in late autumn of 2024, and it still haunts me to this day. I've been a long-distance bus driver for Greyhound for 23 years. My route runs through the northern states, from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, through Minnesota, all the way to the Canadian border and back. Endless highways, tiny towns where everyone knows everyone, gas stations that never close, with sleepy attendants behind scratched glass. Over the years, I've seen it all: drunks, fights, medical emergencies, even one armed robbery. But nothing prepared me for what happened that November night. The detective came to my house early Monday morning. I had just gotten home after a night shift, about to go to bed, when the doorbell rang. A tall man in his 50s, dark coat, tired eyes. He introduced himself as Detective Johnson, Ramsey County Police Department, Minnesota. He asked if I could spare a few minutes to talk about a woman who had been on my bus 2 weeks earlier. My heart dropped. I knew exactly who he meant. The woman in the heavy coat and long scarf who boarded in Sioux Falls and was supposed to travel all the way to North Bay. The one covered in bruises, whose husband chased our bus for more than 300 kilometers through the night. The detective said her name was Sarah Miller, 38 years old, elementary school teacher. She had gone missing 12 days ago, last seen that same night, the night she boarded my bus. After that, nothing, as if she vanished into the dark. I invited the detective in and poured him some coffee. My hands were trembling when I set the cup down. He opened his notebook and asked if I remembered the trip in detail. I said I did. How could I forget? For days after it happened, I couldn't sleep. Start from the beginning, he said. So I did. It was Tuesday, November 15th, late autumn. That year, winter had come early. Nights already sank below 10 degrees minus. My route left Sioux Falls at 9 p.m. sharp, scheduled to arrive in North Bay, Ontario, around noon the next day. 14.5 hours on the road, excluding stops. I remember that evening vividly. The Greyhound terminal in Sioux Falls, a small one-story brick building on the edge of town. Inside, only about a dozen people waited. Students, an older couple, a man carrying a guitar case. Just another quiet weekday evening. Or so I thought. She was the last to board, 5 minutes before departure. I was just finishing loading the luggage under the bus when I caught sight of her. A woman in a massive navy blue coat, clearly several sizes too big, with a thick knitted scarf wrapped so tightly around her face that I could barely see her features. I remember thinking she was overdressed for the weather. -10 isn't -30. Locals usually don't bother with coats that heavy. By the time I got behind the wheel, she was already seated, third row on the right, by the window. She handed me her ticket without a word, her hand trembling. Sioux Falls to North Bay, with a transfer in Winnipeg. A long journey. Then I noticed it, a dark bruise just above her scarf along her neck, another one under her right eye. She turned toward the window, clearly wanting to disappear. It wasn't the first time I'd seen something like that. In 23 years of driving, I'd transported all sorts of people. Women fleeing abusive husbands, men on the run from debt or the law, teenagers escaping home. Buses are different from planes. No one checks IDs that closely. You can buy a ticket under any name and vanish into the road. I never interfered. It wasn't my job. Point A to point B. That was it. At least, that's what I used to tell myself. But something felt off that night. She wasn't just scared, she was terrified. Her whole body trembled, and not from the cold. Every time someone stepped onto the bus or walked down the aisle, she flinched, clutching a worn leather bag to her chest, as though her life depended on it. The fear in her eyes was raw, primal, the kind you see in an animal caught in headlights an instant before impact. I shut the doors and turned the key. Departure time, 9 o'clock sharp. I shifted into drive, but then something in the rearview mirror froze me. A black sedan screeched to a stop in front of the station entrance, half blocking the driveway. A tall man jumped out, denim jacket, baseball cap, and stormed toward the terminal. I looked back to the woman in the third row. She saw him too. Her face went pale as chalk. She shrank into her seat, trying to vanish behind the chair in front of her, whispering something I couldn't make out, but from her lips, it looked like, "No, no, no, please, no." The man rushed inside. Through the bus windows, I saw him at the ticket counter, gesturing wildly at the clerk, pointing toward my bus. Doris, I'd known her 15 years. She shook her head, trying to calm him down, but he raised his voice. Even through the glass, I could hear him shouting. Doris stepped back, raising her hands in fear. There were about 15 passengers on board. Most drifted half asleep, faces lit by the glow of their phones. No one noticed what was happening outside. No one, except me and her. I made a decision. I still don't know why. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe irritation, seeing that man shouting at Doris, or maybe just that look on her face, pure, hopeless despair. I slammed my foot on the gas. The bus lurched forward. We pulled out from the station, not through the main gate, but the narrow service exit behind the building, the one only staff normally used. In the mirror, I saw the man burst out of the terminal. He spotted the bus, then sprinted toward his car, but we were already gone, merging onto the main road, swallowed by the dark. For the first 20 kilometers, I drove faster than I should, eyes darting between the road and the mirrors. The highway was empty, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through endless darkness. November in South Dakota. No stars, no moon, just the faint silhouettes of bare trees and the beam of our headlights slicing 50 meters ahead into nothing. Around the 25th kilometer, I saw them, headlights in the distance. One car holding steady 300 meters behind us. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. Same road, same direction, but when I slowed down, the car slowed too. When I sped up, so did it. That's when I knew. He was following us. I glanced at the woman. She sat turned toward the window, arms wrapped around herself, her shoulders trembling. She was crying, silently, trying not to draw attention. Our first stop was in a small town called Brookings, about 60 kilometers from Sioux Falls. Population, roughly 20,000. A quiet college town, a few gas stations, and one Greyhound stop, a little office attached to a 24-hour gas station. We usually stayed there 15 minutes. A chance for passengers to stretch, grab coffee, smoke a cigarette. But that night, my stomach churned. If that man was really following her, what would happen when we stopped? Would he try to take her? Would he make a scene in front of everyone? As we neared Brookings, I spotted an old phone booth near the edge of the gas station. Somehow, it still worked. That's when I made another decision. I'd call the police, not tell them about the woman. Just say a black sedan was tailing my bus. Maybe a drunk driver, maybe worse. Let them check it out. When we pulled up, I told the passengers to stay inside the bus while I handled something. Then I stepped out. The November air bit sharp and cold. The phone booth reeked of cigarettes and something sour. I lifted the receiver, dialed 911, and told the dispatcher what was happening. He said a patrol would come by, but it might take about 20 minutes. The nearest unit was busy on a call across town. 20 minutes. Too long. I turned toward the road, and there it was. The black sedan, parked about 200 meters away on the side of the highway. Headlights off, only the faint glow of the parking lights. Waiting. That's when I decided to improvise. I returned to the bus and told everyone there'd be a brief technical delay, maybe 30 or 40 minutes. I asked the passengers to step outside, stretch their legs, grab a coffee in the station cafe. One by one, they filed out, all except her. She stayed in her seat, pressed into the corner by the window as if the glass itself could protect her. When the others had moved toward the building, I walked up the aisle and stopped beside her row. Quietly, I asked her name. She said, Sarah. I asked if that man outside was her husband. She nodded. Then I asked if he hurt her. Another nod, and tears began to fall, slow, soundless. I told her I'd help. I still don't know why. I wasn't supposed to care, wasn't supposed to interfere, but the words were out before I even realized I'd said them. I'll help you get away, I told her. The way she looked at me then, with shock and gratitude and something like disbelief, chilled me to my core. It was the look of someone who'd just been promised the impossible, as if I'd sworn to save her from death itself. Detective Johnson was silent, scribbling notes as I spoke. When I paused, he looked up and asked quietly, "What happened next?" I took a slow breath and continued. The plan was simple and dangerous. According to the route, we still had a few stops left before the border. Watertown first, then Aberdeen, then into Canada. But I planned to make an unscheduled stop in a tiny speck of a town between them, a place called Cochrane. Population, less than 1,000. One main street, a handful of houses, a weather-beaten church, and a gas station at the edge of town. The perfect place to disappear quietly. I explained it to Sarah. When we reached Cochrane, I'd pull over to the side of the road, pretend the bus was having engine trouble. She'd slip out through the rear emergency exit. It could be opened from the inside quietly if you knew the trick. Then she'd cross the road and head into the woods. About 300 meters in, there was an old forest trail I remembered from previous runs. If she followed it for 2 kilometers, she'd come out on the far side of Cochrane. By the time her husband passed through, we'd already be gone. She listened, trembling. Her eyes glistened with both fear and hope. I asked if she had money. She nodded, patting her bag. Then I asked if she had somewhere to go. She said yes. A friend from college, living on a farm 15 kilometers outside Cochrane. She'd call her once she arrived. I took off my fleece jacket and handed it to her. All she had was that oversized coat, thin and battered from years of wear. "Nights get cold out there," I said. She pressed the jacket to her chest, whispering a shaky, "Thank you." We pulled out of Brookings, and the black sedan followed. Always the same distance, 300 meters behind. Never closer, never farther. In the mirror, its headlights glowed like 2 predatory eyes in the dark, watching. We passed Watertown without stopping. I told the passengers there'd been a change of schedule. We'd stop only in Aberdeen. No one objected. Most of them were asleep anyway. The bus hummed through the night, engine steady against the silence of the plains. Outside the windows, occasional lights from distant farms, grain silos, the endless stretch of fields under a starless sky. I turned the radio on low. Some old country song whispered quietly from the speakers. Sarah sat still, staring out the window. In the rearview mirror, I could see her reflection. A pale face, eyes red from crying, hands clenched into fists in her lap. She looked like someone who had already accepted her fate and was now just waiting to see how it would end. Around 11:30, we approached the spot. To the right, dense woods, pines and spruces, packed tightly together like a wall. To the left, open fields, dusted white with the season's first snow. I raised my hand in the mirror. 5 fingers, 5 minutes. She nodded. I eased my foot off the gas, flipped on the hazard lights, and pulled the bus onto the shoulder. The engine rumbled, then went still. A few passengers stirred. "What's wrong?" someone asked. "Transmission issue," I said. "Just a quick check, 2 minutes." Then I stepped outside. The night air hit hard and cold. I walked around, lifted the hood, pretending to tinker with something inside. In the mirror, I spotted the black sedan, parked 300 meters behind, still, headlights glowing, not moving an inch. Inside the bus, Sarah stood. She moved quietly down the aisle, slow, careful, invisible. Most passengers didn't even glance up, half asleep, lost in their screens. She reached the back, found the emergency latch, pulled it. The door swung open without a sound. A rush of cold air filled the cabin. I watched her from the corner of my eye, still bent under the hood. She jumped down, landed softly, and crossed the road, her figure swallowed almost instantly by darkness and trees. The door closed behind her. The forest took her in. It all happened in less than 30 seconds. I slammed the hood shut, climbed back on board, and told the passengers everything was fine, just a minor issue. Then I started the engine and merged back onto the highway. In the mirror, the black sedan rolled forward too, still trailing us. The plan had worked. At least, that's what I thought. For the next 2 hours, I drove stone-faced, but my hands were trembling on the wheel. The sedan stayed behind us. Same distance, same speed. If he hadn't noticed she was gone, why was he still following? And if he had, why wasn't he closer? I didn't know which was worse. When we finally reached Aberdeen, I parked the bus for our scheduled 15-minute stop. And he stopped too. I watched through the window as the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, about 40, close-cropped hair, a face carved from stone. He walked straight toward the bus. My pulse hammered. Cold sweat rolled down my back. He stood by the door, watching the passengers disembark one by one, eyes scanning every face. Then he stepped inside. He moved slowly down the aisle, studying each seat, each person. When he reached the back, he stopped. The seat where she'd been sitting was empty. He stood there for several seconds, just staring at it. Then he turned to me. "Where's the woman who was sitting here?" he asked. I kept my voice even. "Must have gotten off earlier," I said. "I don't keep track." He stared at me for a long time, dark eyes, cold, sharp. Then he turned without a word and walked out. Through the windshield, I watched him circle the tiny terminal, check the restrooms, peer into the cafe. Finally, he went back to his car, sat behind the wheel, and pulled out his phone. He talked for nearly 10 minutes, gesturing, cursing. At one point, he slammed his fist against the steering wheel. When we finally pulled away from Aberdeen, his car didn't follow. Through the mirror, I watched it grow smaller and smaller, until the parking lot swallowed it whole. For the first time in nearly 3 hours, I let out a breath. I thought it was over. Retelling it to Detective Johnson, I could feel that same tension tightening in my chest again. He sat across from me, mostly silent, nodding occasionally, his pen scratching faintly in that worn notebook of his. When I finished, he lifted his eyes and asked if Sarah had ever reached out afterward. I shook my head. No, not once. I'd given her my phone number that night, told her to call if she ever needed help, but she never did. Then he asked something else, whether I remembered the name of the friend she was going to see in Cochrane. I told him no. She never said a name, only that her friend lived on a farm north of town. Johnson nodded slowly, wrote something down, then looked back up at me. There was something different in his eyes now. He hesitated, and then sighed. "I'm afraid I have bad news," he said. "Sarah Miller never made it to that farm. Or rather, she did, for a moment. And then she disappeared." He explained that the local sheriff in Cochrane had received a missing person report 4 days after the bus left Sioux Falls, filed by her husband, the same man who had been following us that night. He claimed his wife had vanished, last seen boarding a Greyhound bus. The sheriff started asking around town. 3 people remembered seeing a woman matching Sarah's description the next morning. She was sitting alone in the only cafe in Cochrane, sipping coffee, scanning the windows like she expected someone to burst in any second. One witness, a waitress named Gloria, told police that the woman asked how to reach the Hendrickson farm, 15 kilometers north of town. Gloria gave her directions. Later that same morning, an elderly farmer, Roy McKenzie, 72, said he'd picked up a frightened woman walking along the roadside. He confirmed she asked to be dropped at the turnoff near the Hendricksons' land. He let her out at the crossroads, about 2 kilometers from the farmhouse. She thanked him and walked away toward the trees. No one ever saw her again. The police drove to the Hendrickson farm. Old man John Hendrickson, his wife Martha, and their son David, all three swore no one had come by. They didn't know any Sarah. They'd never heard the name Miller. The police searched the property. Nothing. Then they searched the woods, the roadsides, the nearby creek. Still nothing. It was as if Sarah had reached the crossroads and simply vanished into the dark. Detective Johnson fell silent. The only sound in the room was the clock ticking. Then he asked me, didn't I find it odd how terrified she was of her husband? I frowned. What do you mean? Of course not. She was covered in bruises. She could barely breathe when she saw him. He nodded slowly, and then he told me something that flipped everything upside down. They'd spoken to her husband, Michael Miller, 42, a civil engineer. He'd shown them medical records. 3 years earlier, Sarah had been in a severe car accident, traumatic brain injury. Since then, she'd suffered from paranoid delusions and intermittent hallucinations. There were reports, 5 in total, of previous disappearances. Each time, she had fled, insisting her husband was trying to kill her. Each time, they had found her, brought her home. Michael presented psychiatric evaluations, prescriptions, even a legal order naming him her guardian. The bruises on her face, according to him, from a fall down the stairs 2 days before she ran. He'd called an ambulance. There was a report, medical documentation, statements from EMTs. It all checked out. And that night, yes, he chased the bus. Not to harm her, but to bring her home.
He wasn't her abuser. He was the man trying to save her from herself. I sat there, silent, unable to form a single word. Detective Johnson just looked at me, waiting. Finally, I asked the only thing that came to mind. Do you believe his story? He sighed, shrugged slightly. I don't know, he said. The documents look real. Michael Miller even passed a polygraph. Clean. He had no record, no history of violence, no police visits, nothing. But then, Johnson leaned forward, tapping his pen on the table. There's one thing, though, he added. His tone changed, lower, heavier. In the past 15 years, 7 women have disappeared in Cochrane. 7, all between the ages of 30 and 45. All vanished under strange, quiet circumstances. One walked into a store and never walked out. Another was last seen at the town's only gas station. A third disappeared after being offered a ride on the highway. No witnesses, no bodies, no leads. Each case investigated, each time. Dead end, small town, everyone knows everyone, and no one ever talks. Detective Johnson had been gathering files for 3 months, trying to connect the dots. No success. When I asked about the Hendricksons, he smiled, a tired, bitter smile. Said the family was practically untouchable, owned half the land around Cochrane, knew the sheriff, the judge, the mayor. Good people, the locals would say. When the police searched the farm, the sheriff himself made sure everything was by the book. No overreach, no digging too deep. They found nothing. Johnson closed his notebook. Officially, he said, Sarah Miller's case is still open, but unofficially, it's cold, frozen. Her husband went home, filed for a missing persons report. In 6 months, he could file again, to have her declared legally dead. Before leaving, Johnson handed me his business card. Call me, he said, if you remember anything, or if she ever reaches out. I took the card, said I would. He walked out, and I just sat there, staring at nothing. The same questions kept circling in my mind. Had I helped a battered wife escape an abuser? Or had I helped a delusional woman run straight into the arms of a killer? Or was something happening in that town? Something much worse than either of those possibilities. I couldn't shake it. For 3 days, I went about my routes on autopilot. But every moment, in the hum of the engine, the whine of the tires, I saw her face again. Sarah, her trembling hands, that look of pure terror, and Johnson's words about 7 missing women, the Hendricksons, Michael's story of a mentally ill wife. It didn't add up, none of it did. I felt it deep in my gut, something was wrong. Friday was my day off. I got into my old Ford pickup and drove to Cochrane, 400 kilometers, 5 hours on the same road I'd taken that night. It felt strange seeing it all in daylight. The forest where she vanished, now quiet, almost peaceful. Pines dusted with snow, paths crisscrossing into the woods. It didn't look like a place where someone disappears. It looked ordinary. Too ordinary. Cochrane greeted me with gray skies and stillness. A ghost of a town. Flat main street, wooden houses, a white church steeple, a hardware store, a postal office, a neon diner sign that buzzed faintly in the cold. Population, 917. A place where everyone knows everyone, and where a stranger might as well wear a spotlight. I parked outside the cafe. Inside, it was warm, smelled of bacon and burnt coffee. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman with silver hair tied in a bun. I knew instantly. Gloria, the waitress who'd seen Sarah. In the corner, 3 men in oil-stained overalls sat playing cards. They stopped mid-hand as I entered, each of them turning to look, silent, measured, unblinking. For a long moment, no one said a word. I sat at the counter and ordered a coffee and a sandwich. Gloria brought them without a word. I asked how long she had been working there. She said 38 years. Then I mentioned the missing woman. Said I'd heard she'd spoken to the police. Gloria froze, her shoulders stiffened, and her eyes went cold. She asked who I was. I told her the truth, that I was the bus driver who brought Sarah Miller to this town. Gloria stepped back, crossed her arms, her lips tightened into a thin line. I've told the police everything I know, she said. There's nothing else to say. I tried keeping the conversation going, but she turned and disappeared into the kitchen. The men in the corner, 3 of them, dressed in worn denim and thick boots, hadn't said a word the whole time, but now I could feel their eyes on my back. I finished my coffee, left my money on the counter, and walked outside. The wind cut sharp down the empty street, 15 below, maybe more. Snow drifted across the road in faint gray ribbons. I walked the length of Main Street, then stepped into the hardware store. An old man, 80 at least, sat behind the counter, reading the local paper. I bought a pack of batteries I didn't need, just to start a conversation. We talked about the weather for a bit, and then, casually, I mentioned the Hendrickson farm. He lowered the newspaper, studied me carefully, then asked why I wanted to know. I said I'd heard they might be selling some land, and I was looking to buy property in the area. The old man let out a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. Hendricksons don't sell, he said. They buy. Always have. He told me they owned half the county now. Cattle, corn, equipment. Everything tied to them somehow. They keep to themselves, he added. Good folks, but private. You don't go out there unless you've got a reason. I hesitated, then asked if he'd heard about the missing women. That wiped the smirk off his face. He looked down at the counter, folded the newspaper slowly, and said he didn't know anything, then stood up. Store's closing, he said. It was barely 3 in the afternoon. I got the message. When I stepped outside, I knew I was being watched. From the cafe window, Gloria's eyes followed me. Across the street, a woman stood behind lace curtains, motionless. A police cruiser rolled slowly down the street. The sheriff turned his head as he passed, and our eyes met for just a second. That was enough to send a chill through my spine. It felt like I'd walked into one of those small-town horror stories, the kind where everyone knows exactly what's happening and keeps their mouths shut. I decided to stop pretending, got into my truck, asked Gloria for directions to the Hendrickson place. She frowned, hesitated, then told me. I drove north, the road narrowing to 2 frozen lanes cutting through endless fields. Snow whipped across the asphalt like smoke. The sky hung low and gray, heavy, silent. After 15 kilometers, a sign came into view. Private property, no trespassing. I drove past it. The road dipped into a shallow valley. That's where I saw it. The Hendrickson farm. A big 2-story brick house, an aging barn, several outbuildings, cattle pens. Everything looked orderly, clean, almost too clean. But the quiet, the perfect stillness, felt wrong. Like the earth itself was holding its breath. Maybe it was the way the house stood turned away from the road, its blank windows facing the northern field. Whatever it was, it felt like a place that didn't want me there. I parked by the gate and stepped out. No movement, no voices, no animals. The only sound was the wind brushing through dry grass. I knocked on the front door. Waited 1 minute, 2. Knocked again, louder this time. No answer. I walked around the house. All the windows sealed tight with heavy curtains. Nothing to see. The barn was unlocked. Inside, rusted machinery, bales of hay, old feed bags stacked high. The smell of oil and something faintly sour, hard to place. Then behind the barn I saw another building. Stone, low, windowless, 50 meters out, half hidden by the slope of the hill. One heavy metal door, older than the rest of the property, maybe built decades before. I walked toward it. The door was chained, a thick iron padlock holding it shut. I bent down, tried to look through the gap. Nothing, only blackness. That's when I heard it, a voice, calm but sharp. I turned. 10 meters away, a man stood watching me. Work jacket, jeans, a pump-action shotgun hanging from one hand. He didn't aim it, but he didn't lower it either. "Said you could come out here?" he asked. "This is private property." His tone was flat, measured. I told him who I was, that I'd driven a woman, Sarah Miller, out this way weeks ago, that she never made it to where she was going. He looked at me for a long moment, expressionless, then said one sentence quietly. "We told the police everything. No woman came here. You should go now." That's when I realized who he was. David Hendrickson. I asked about the stone building, the one without windows. David's jaw tightened. "Old ice house," he said. "Used to store supplies. That's all." Then he looked me square in the face. "You should leave. Now." I didn't argue. The shotgun in his hands was reason enough. I walked back to my truck, started the engine. Before turning around, I caught one last glimpse in the rearview mirror. David Hendrickson still stood in the same spot, watching me, motionless. And then I saw it. In the second-floor window, a curtain moved, just slightly. Behind it, a face, pale, thin, eyes wide open, watching me. For 1, maybe 2 seconds, and then it vanished. The curtain fell back into place. I froze. The breath caught in my throat, because I knew that face. I'd seen it before, in the photograph Detective Johnson showed me, Sarah Miller. I slammed on the brakes so hard that the tires skidded on the ice, spun halfway around staring at the house. Everything looked still again. Curtains closed, no movement. David hadn't moved either. But now his posture had changed. The shotgun was up, directly aimed at me. He started walking forward, slow and steady. I had maybe 2 seconds to decide what to do. I could jump out, yell, tell him what I'd seen, try to force my way inside. But then what? If he let me in, what would I find? A woman who'd deny everything? A bare room with no proof I wasn't hallucinating? Or something worse? Something I didn't want to understand? I hit the gas. Gravel sprayed out behind the tires as the truck lurched forward. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely keep it on the road. 1 kilometer, 2, 5. Only then did I pull over, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I grabbed my phone and dialed Johnson. He picked up after the 3rd ring. I barely paused for breath. Told him everything. That I'd gone to Cochrane, that I found the farm, and that I'd seen Sarah in the window. He listened quietly, too quietly. Then he asked, steady as ever, "You sure about what you saw?" "I'm certain," I said. "It was her." He sighed. "That's a problem," he said finally. He explained, the Hendricksons owned the land, no warrant, no authority. And I'd trespassed, which meant if I pushed it any further, I'd be the one facing legal trouble. "One woman's face in a window," he said, "isn't enough to open a case.
and without cause, no judge would authorize a search. I gripped the phone until my knuckles turned white. "What do I do then?" I asked. Johnson stayed silent for a long moment. "I'll look back into the missing persons," he said finally. "Maybe there's something we missed, connections, patterns, but it'll take time." Then his tone changed, more personal, almost pleading. "Listen to me. Don't go back there. Don't do anything stupid. Cochrane isn't the kind of place that forgets a face." I said I understood. I said I wouldn't go back. But that was a lie. I got home late that night, around 11. The whole drive back, my mind kept looping the same thought. Sarah was there.
In that house, alive. I had seen her. But what could I do now? If I went to the police, again, they'd ask for proof I didn't have. If I went back alone, they'd kill me and call it self-defense. And if I told anyone else, no one would believe me anyway. When I reached my porch, I noticed the envelope. Plain white, no stamp, no return address. Someone had slipped it directly into my mailbox. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside, one sheet of paper. Printed, no signature. The message was short. "Stop looking. She's where she wanted to be. Keep pushing, and you'll regret it. We know your address. We know your route." I stood there, the cold crawling through my coat, reading the words again and again until the page blurred in my hands. It was a threat, direct, unmistakable. Someone was watching me. Someone knew where I lived, where I worked, and what I had done. I called Detective Johnson, told him everything. He arrived 40 minutes later, coat, tired eyes, same notebook. He took the letter, sealed it in a plastic bag, said it was serious, that this counted as a credible threat. He'd send it for analysis, fingerprints, paper type, the usual. But even as he said it, I could see it in his eyes. Doubt. Cochrane wasn't his jurisdiction. The local sheriff had already buried the case. And the Hendricksons, well, they were untouchable. We had nothing. Just my story about a face in a window and one anonymous letter. A week passed. Johnson called twice. Said the forensics came back clean. Plain paper, common toner, no prints, no leads. He dug up old files on the other missing women, and there were patterns. 3 of them had last been seen within 5 kilometers of the Hendrickson farm. But again, nothing solid, only whispers, coincidences. So I kept driving my route. Same towns, same faces. But every black car in the mirror made my pulse spike. Every set of headlights behind me felt too close. Sleep got harder, nights longer. Sometimes I'd wake up certain someone was outside my house, watching from the trees. Once I thought I saw movement near the fence. Another time, footprints in the snow that weren't mine. Each time, nothing, just silence. Then, on the 10th day after Cochrane, another envelope. Same cheap paper, same lack of postage. I brought it inside. My hands were trembling again before I even tore it open, but this one had no words. Inside was a small piece of fabric, dark blue, knitted. I knew it instantly. Sarah's scarf, the same one she wore on that frozen night in Sioux Falls. Nothing else. No letter, no note. Just that fragment of cloth. I didn't need words to understand. They knew I'd recognize it. They wanted me to. I called Johnson again. He came, took the fabric for testing, DNA, blood, anything he could find. 3 days later, the results came back. DNA matched Sarah Miller. No blood, no biological traces. The fabric had been washed, cleaned, deliberately. Johnson said it might be enough to request a search warrant for the Hendrickson farm. He filed the paperwork, but the judge refused, said it wasn't enough. A piece of cloth could have been planted by anyone. It didn't prove she was there. That's when something inside me snapped. Sarah was there. I knew it, like I knew the taste of my own breath. I'd seen her face. I held a piece of her scarf in my hands, and still nothing. No arrests, no search, no justice. Time was running out, so I made a choice. The last desperate kind, the kind you don't come back from. 2 nights later, I went back to Cochrane, alone. No police, no backup, just a flashlight, a crowbar, and a knife. It was -20, a hard, moonlit cold that stuck to your lungs. I parked a kilometer from the farm, hiding the truck among trees. Walked the rest of the way on foot. Each step crunching in the snow, echoing louder than it should. The house was dark, silent, sleeping. The only sound was the wind and my own heart beating. I slipped around to the back, to that stone building, the one without windows. The lock looked ancient, iron and thick. I wrestled with the crowbar, but it wouldn't budge, too strong. I circled the walls, no windows, no vents, just solid stone. That's when I heard it. At first I thought it was the wind, a faint sound, muffled, hollow. Then again. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more knocks, slow, steady, deliberate. Someone was inside, and they were sending a signal. I pressed my ear to the cold metal door. The pattern came again. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Not random, a plea. Someone wanted out. I swung the crowbar against the lock. Once, twice. The clang echoed across the quiet fields. No give. I hit it again, harder. A shout broke the silence. A man's voice from somewhere behind the house. Then came the barking. Dogs. I kept swinging, again. On the 5th blow, the metal groaned. On the 6th, it cracked. I hit it a final time, screaming, and the lock shattered. I tore the door open. A thick gust of air poured out, stale, cold, and heavy, with the smell of damp stone and fear. I raised the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark. A staircase, leading down. Behind me, sounds grew. Footsteps, shouts, dogs barking wild in the night. I had seconds, maybe less. I ran down the stairs. The basement was huge, a maze of narrow corridors and doors. I flung them open one after another. The first room, empty, except for a single bed and a chain bolted to the wall. The second, the same. And then, the third, Sarah. She was there, sitting in a corner, shivering, filthy. Her clothes torn, her skin all bruised and pale. When the light hit her face, she screamed, covering her eyes like a frightened animal. I dropped the flashlight and went to her, trying to unchain the lock around her ankle. She fought me, wild, hysterical, scratching, kicking, sobbing. She didn't know who I was, didn't understand what was happening. She thought they'd come back for her. Her voice broke on every breath. She kept whispering, over and over, "No, please, not again." I told her it was over, that I was getting her out, that she was safe, but even as I said it, I knew how wrong it sounded under that cold concrete ceiling. I grabbed her shoulders, forced her to look at me. "I'm the bus driver," I shouted, "the one who helped you escape. I came back for you. I came to save you." She stared at my face, confused at first. Then recognition flickered in her eyes. She whispered my name. The chain wouldn't break. I hammered at the lock with the crowbar again and again, but there was no time. Above us, footsteps, voices shouting. The slam of a door opening. They were coming. I turned. 3 silhouettes filled the doorway. David Hendrickson stood in front, still holding that shotgun. "You made a mistake," he said. "A big one. Now you'll stay here, both of you." I knew what that meant. It was over. But there was one thing I'd done before coming here, one thing that changed everything. I had told someone, a reporter, Carol Richards from the county paper. I gave her everything, names, addresses, dates, proof, and I told her if I didn't make it back by sunrise, publish it. Make it loud. Carol kept her word. The next morning, when I didn't answer my phone, the story went live. Every detail, Hendrickson Farm, the missing women, the threats. It spread across social media in hours. By noon, police cars from 3 counties were parked outside the farm. By evening, Detective Johnson was there. So were the big city journalists. It became national news. They found us. Down in that basement. Sarah and 2 other women, 2 of the 7 who had vanished. The rest, they found later. 4 shallow graves behind the barn. The women had been dead for years. The Hendricksons, John, Martha, and David, were all arrested. At trial, it came out that they'd been doing this for decades, kidnapping women passing through the area, keeping them locked in that cellar, using them as slaves, and burying them when they were no longer useful. The sheriff of Cochrane was arrested too. He'd known everything, took money to stay quiet. Even the judge who denied the search warrant was part of it. The story about Michael Miller, Sarah's loving, worried husband, and her supposed mental illness was all a lie. He really was her husband, and he really did abuse her. The medical records, the guardianship papers, the psychiatrist's notes, all forged. When Sarah fled, he hired a private investigator to track her, then sold her location to the Hendricksons for $10,000. He was arrested too. Accessory to kidnapping, 20 years in prison. Sarah survived. Physically. Mentally. That's another story. The last time I saw her was in the courtroom. She sat in the front row, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the floor. She never looked at me, not once. Didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't even blink. As if she didn't recognize me at all. Johnson told me later she moved to another state, changed her name, trying to build a new life. No contact with anyone from the case, including me. I understood. To her, I was part of the nightmare, just another face from the dark. It's been almost a year now. I still drive the same route, same towns, same roads. But things are different. When someone steps onto my bus, nervous, scared, with a bruise on their face, I don't look away anymore. I ask if they need help, real help. And if they do, I call the police. I connect them with shelters. I give them numbers, names, lifelines. I don't look away, but sometimes late at night, when the road is empty and the mirrors show nothing but the endless dark, I think about Sarah. And I wonder, if I hadn't gone back that night, if I hadn't broken that lock, how long would she have lasted down there? How many more would have disappeared? And then I think about the others, the ones I didn't save, the ones who looked at me the same way she did, silently asking for help, and I missed it. The ones still out there, somewhere in the dark, waiting, hoping for someone to come, but no one comes. I think about that every night, and I don't sleep much anymore. Thank you for watching.